So I went to a doctor and they refused to help me. And I know why now. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about why we live off grid and why I've decided to do what we're doing, especially with my health. I wanted to show you something. A while back, I gotta be careful I don't show you my license plate. A while back, I was backing up and I was probably doing, just creeping along. And I backed into a pole and it just crinkled the bumper. So you can see here that the paint is worn away because when the tailgate comes down, it hits it. And I went and got a quote for this and it was $4,000 to replace this bumper. I've thought about pulling it out, but then I think, well, if I have to drill a hole in it, it'll probably rust. It's not rusting, so I think I'll leave it alone. I just couldn't believe it. Just crinkled. I remember, I don't know, back in the 80s, they used to make a Ford Escort. I don't know, they may still make them, who knows. And they had this thing called the 5-mile-an-hour bumper. So if you bumped into something at 5 miles an hour, it had a spring load in it and it would keep it from caving in. Back in the 90s, I had a Ford Ranger that didn't even come with a bumper, but I was able to buy a bumper for $200. Bolted right on, no problems. I mean, this thing is a nightmare to take off and put on. There's bolts everywhere. Because I thought about just doing it myself. I probably could. It'd take me a month to do it. I do know why they make these vehicles so cheap now. I mean, they're expensive. Don't get me wrong. They're absolutely expensive. But they make them cheap that way when you do damage them like that, they can sell you more stuff. I'm a Chevy fan. Chevy knows that if I'm in the market for a vehicle, I'll buy another Chevy. I've always bought Chevys except for the Ford Ranger. The reason I don't buy Ford Rangers is because that thing couldn't get out of its own way. So since then, I've always bought Chevys. I've had Chevy Cobalt and the Chevy Cavalier and the Chevy Malibu when I was in business. I mean, that's just all I drove was Chevys. And then I bought the Chevy Colorado, and it's got 80,000 miles on it. It runs really great, but it's built real cheap. And the reason these automotive companies make things so cheap is because trying to acquire new customers is very difficult. So if you make a vehicle that will last forever, you won't come back and buy a new vehicle. So that means they have to go out and look for a new customer. That means they have to compete against the other automotive companies. So once they get a customer, they do everything they can to keep that customer. I bought this Colorado in 2015, but I still get an email today, I don't know, once a month from the dealer that sold it to me, always telling me about the sales, and because it's cheap. Computer program sends out an email, it reminds me, oh yeah, I remember that guy, he was really good to me. The most advertising they got to do is a new model year. If you don't advertise, then you got sales department, and so you're always trying to drum up new business with sales. But back in the old days, things lasted forever. You know, you buy a refrigerator and it'll last 4 generations. The thing back then is innovation. People were always inventing things. So if you had an ice chest and then they invented a refrigerator, you would think, huh, I'm gonna go out and get that cool thing. But you will notice that innovation is pretty slow right now. It's been that way most of my life. The biggest innovation I've seen in my lifetime, the computer, home computer systems. Even at that, once they got it invented, it was just a matter of improvements. It wasn't so much that, hey, we got this great new technology like Microsoft 97 and then Microsoft 2000 and then Microsoft, and it was improvements. The computers themselves, always improving the processor speed, when my grandpa would build a house, my grandpa was a carpenter, he'd build a house, build it out of oak, the thing would last 1,000,000 years. Hurricane come through, nothing. But nowadays, everything's prefabbed and modular and put together in a factory, and they fall apart pretty quickly. Siding. My siding here is metal. I'm hoping that'll last a really long time, but vinyl siding? What's the sense in vinyl siding? It doesn't last very long. The idea is to constantly get you to buy new material. It's a marketing ploy. There's 2 things that make companies do that, where they're not inventing anymore. One problem is regulation has become so atrocious in the United States that Companies don't even want to get involved with inventing something. You can't even set up a lemonade stand in New York City without all these permits. And 12-year-olds getting arrested for having a lemonade stand. Then we have the risk of lawsuits. So people don't want to invent new things. So companies like pharmaceutical companies make a vaccine and then get the governments of all the world to mandate that you got to get the shot. And then to prevent from getting lawsuits in case there's a side effect on it, they got the government to say you can't be sued if something's wrong with this vaccine. So governments actually paid out damages, not the company. The government paid out damages if somebody got sick from the vaccine. Look at the hoverboard and lithium batteries. That was new technology and immediately got taken off the market, I think. People are getting hurt and batteries are exploding. Who wants to take that kind of risk? That's dangerous. And then the third thing is companies are lazy. They want to make a lot of money without a lot of investments, which kind of goes back to the invention thing. But it's a lot easier to make a new model car. Okay, so I'm gonna make a new truck. And instead of calling it the Chevy Silverado, we're gonna call it the Chevy Colorado. Woo! Mine was Motor Trend Truck of the Year. So they pay off Motor Trend to say, look at this. So that was their advertisement. One-time advertisement. Everybody went out and bought one, including me. We live in a society that I think has gotten real lazy. And they don't want to take care of themselves anymore. They want everybody else to take care of them. And if something happens, they want to sue somebody. And that comes down to the medical fields also. I watched a John Stossel report a long time ago. And he was talking about how Medicaid or Medicare or whatever that is was under a lot of financial strain at the time. And what it was is people were treating the doctor's office like a social visit. It wasn't something like, oh, I'm sick, I need to go to the doctor. They go in once a month and have a good time. Well, doctors had to do something to keep the pace of their customers coming in. Well, what they decided to do was in the 90s, they came up with addictive pharmaceuticals, and that kept people coming back. And I think that's still a problem today. I think there's a little bit more government regulation on doctors being able to give that kind of medication out. And hospitals have to monitor how many times a patient comes in, and, just all kinds of stuff. So that died off. So what's next? Well, what's next is, how do we keep people sick? So they'll come back, but we want to make them feel good, so they will come back. How do we do that? Oh, you got high blood pressure. So you're going to have to come in every month to get your blood pressure checked and to get your prescriptions adjusted. Well, wait a minute. Why doesn't the doctor try to figure out why you have high blood pressure? Now, I know some people in the audience are going to say, oh, my doctor tells me I need to do this and that and this and that. I know that a lot of people disagree with my diet. I'm a carnivore. I eat just meat and meat-based products. And the reason people disagree with me is because the scientists, the doctors, tell you you're supposed to be eating different things, vegetables. I've said in my channel and my videos that studies now showing that vegetables cause inflammation. So my joints hurt all the time, and I got to go in and get medications, and I got high blood pressure, I got diabetes, but they don't really try to control the symptoms, they just give you drugs for it. Again, I know there's going to be people, oh no, my doctor tells me to do this and that. But I bet there isn't one doctor going to say, have you ever tried the carnivorous diet? I got a patient who was on the carnivorous diet and all his aches and pains went away. His asthma went away. I didn't know there was a cure for asthma, but boy, I found one. It's called a meat diet. That's me. That's an actual testament to a meat diet. So I don't go to the doctor anymore. And the reason is several reasons, actually. I had a friend. He was only 60 years old, got cancer, prostate cancer, and those doctors killed him. I don't even understand it. It was just terrible what they did to him. And I only got to see him every now and then. And the last time I saw him, I was in Minnesota. I mean, he lived in Minnesota, and I was in Minnesota, business trip. I had my daughter with me, and she was like, I don't know, 11 or 12. And I took my daughter on business trips a lot because she learned a lot. She actually was a good helper, and I paid her for her time, and it was a good education. We homeschooled. We went and visited my friend. we went to a restaurant. He met me at the restaurant, and it scared my daughter. Now, she knew the man. She met him before. But he was so sickly looking. And it wasn't from the cancer. It was from the chemo. I never really thought about it. I mean, I just kind of, at the time, thought, well, cancer got him. It's sad. And he died, of course. Then, a few years later, I had this rash. It was the most miserable thing I could imagine. It was just, death would have been preferable. That's how miserable it was. It was just everywhere. And I went to the doctor, and they gave me a prescription. That doctor visit cost me several $100s, and it didn't clear up. So I go back. This time they treat me for scabies. Oh, it's got to be scabies. So they gave me some medication for scabies. It was a lotion, and I followed the instructions. Nothing. Well, I was just so miserable. I mean, I had to do something. So I took matters in my own hand. I started researching what the problem was, what could possibly be causing this. And I discovered it was mold. Well, come to find out, my apartment had mold poisoning. Well, then a few years later, a family member got sick, cancer. And so we sat down, discussed it, and she finally decided that she didn't want to get chemo. She would get the radiation, but not chemo. Well, then she goes and visits the chemo doctor. She has to go visit him. And that doctor put her under such high pressure during that doctor's visit to get chemo that she decided to get it. And she was just constantly sick from the chemo. I mean, just constantly. Well, then she came down with it again a year later, decided not to get it. And that doctor did the same thing. They told her she had zero chance of living. It's over. Oh, we can still put you on chemo. That chemo was $8,000 a dose, and I think she had to go 3 times a week for several weeks. Oh man, can you imagine how rich that doctor got and the pharmaceutical companies got? Chemo, in my mind, is nothing but mustard gas. That chemical weapon they used in World War I. It's been banned. You can't use it in wars anymore, but we can put it into patients. I know there's some chemo now that it's a little bit better, but still, it's poison. And it's not there to cure you. It's there to keep you coming back. So no, doctors are not going to heal me. I have decided that I would prefer to die than visit a doctor. Now, if a broken bone or they got a special tool that I need, such as something for my tooth or glasses I need to get, that kind of stuff, sure. I mean, I can kind of trust them for that. But as far as a medical diagnosis or telling me what kind of diet I'm going to be on, nope, I'm going to do it myself. So, if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was talking about chickens. So I hope I can inspire you to look into your own medical conditions so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.